How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I hope you had a great weekend. This is PSReady, my channel all about PlayStation, and as always, we have 3 topics to cover in this video. The first news story I want to talk about is that Sony is apparently already showing off the PS6 to developers. Second on the list, we're going to talk about how Sony can fix this jacked up pre-order system. Third, you guys are going to be mad, I think, but more remasters are coming. All right, let's jump into the first news story here, which is all about the next PlayStation console. Now that the PS5 Pro is coming out, we're talking about the PlayStation 6 because Sony is already talking about the PlayStation 6. So at the end of September, there was the Tokyo Game Show. Sony wanted to make sure they had the PS5 Pro announced so they could show off a bunch of the stuff that they're working on for that console behind closed doors at the event. But one of the other things they were apparently talking to developers about was the next PlayStation, which is the PlayStation 6. Now, I've seen a lot of people saying this is fake, this is bait, this is way too early. It's really not. I mean, every console manufacturer is on record saying that it takes 3 to 4 years to develop the next console after a new one comes out. And considering that the PS5 Pro is the latest version of the PS5 and they're working on a 2 to 3 year life cycle with that thing, it makes sense that by 2027 or 2028, we will see the PlayStation 6. Now, a couple of months ago, I was thinking that it would be 2028, but honestly, knowing that Xbox is releasing not only a next-gen console, but in addition to that, releasing a handheld alongside it, and Sony has a very similar plan, I would assume that with this whole system that they have now, where they have to do mid-gen refreshes that cost $700 and give you marginal performance bumps that do look really good on screen, especially after watching the Digital Foundry video, I'm even more hyped for the PS5 Pro. I feel like they'll want to get this PS6 and its handheld counterpart out way sooner rather than later, just because they have a lot of competition now. It's not just Xbox that has a handheld. They also have to compete with the Steam Deck and, of course, the big king at the top of the pyramid. I don't really know an analogy for this, but Nintendo. They're like kings of the handheld space, no matter what. No matter how well the Xbox, the Sony handheld, the Steam Deck, these Windows ones like the ROG Ally and the Zotac Zone, no matter how well all of them sold, you could combine probably all of it together and it still wouldn't reach the levels that Nintendo has managed to get to with stuff like the Switch and will presumably get to with the Switch 2. So to me, at least, that kind of justifies Sony going out of their way to talk to developers about this thing. And a lot of people have been reporting on this saying they want to figure out what to focus on for the console. It's not really that, I think. I think they have an idea, of course, of what they want to focus on with the console. I'll talk about that in a sec, but what I think they're really asking the developers for is confirmation that they're going down the right path. The stuff that they want to put in this console and focus on, they want to make sure that it's what developers think they're going to need going into the future with new games. And as for what I think they're really focusing on, PSSR. I think PSSR right now is kind of like this undersold feature. Like, they're talking about it as a marketing point for the PS5 Pro, but as we've seen over the past 2 generations, really, the PS4 generation and PS5 generation, DLSS, FSR, XESS, TSR, all these upscaling techniques that all these games are able to take advantage of, they're no longer a way to get more longevity out of your mid-grade graphics card or your mid-grade console. You know, like the launch PS5, they are just completely necessary features for games to even run at acceptable frame rates at this point. And honestly, it's not the worst thing in the world, because during the PS4 generation, we had stuff like checkerboard rendering or just straight upscaling where it would run the game internally at like 720p or 1080p and then upscale it to 4K, doing its best to just match pixels to the corners of the boxes that it was upscaling, and it just didn't really look great. And we've gotten to a point with DLSS lately where using DLSS makes games look better than if you're running them natively. Like, one example, I'm not going to talk about PC gaming a lot, I promise, because this is PSReady, but I've been playing Hunt Showdown, the new version of it, which has a horrific user interface, with my friend Ben from the Sacred Symbols podcast. And, you know, it looks good when you're not using DLSS, but it shimmers a lot. The edges are rougher. When you turn on DLSS, not only do you get like 30 more frames a second, like I'm well over 100 using DLSS at quality, everything is just nice and crisp and smoothed out, and it looks awesome. So with where DLSS is at, I feel like Sony is just going to continue developing PSSR, and it's awesome because right now in its launch state, like where it's going to be with the PS5 Pro with games like The Last of Us and The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered, it looks freaking phenomenal. So it's only going to get better. I feel like that's going to be a huge pillar to keep up with this 4K 60 FPS future that Sony introduced with the PS5 generation. You're going to need to use upscalers to continue to do that if you're using new engines like Unreal Engine 5 to make games continue to look a lot more realistic. So yeah, Sony's already talking about the PS6. It makes a lot of sense. This thing is just a couple years off, and I'm honestly more excited for the handheld. Like, home consoles are awesome. I love home console gaming, but handhelds are my sweet spot. I've always been a handheld gamer my entire life. I've just been enamored with things like the Game Boy, the PSP, the PS Vita, the 3DS. I have an Analog Pocket, Steam Deck, of course, and the ROG Ally X. It's just nice to have a handheld that can run the same games as my gaming PC or my PlayStation 5. That was like the future that I always wanted growing up, and now that we're here, it's incredible. Next up, let's talk about the pre-order system that Sony's been using for the PlayStation 5 lately with PS Direct, and especially the 30th anniversary console, and how they could improve it. So if you guys didn't know, while my friend Dustin is on paternity leave over at Last Stand Media, I've been doing all the thumbnails for Sacred Symbols, Defining Duke, Punching Up, and Summon Sign. How did I forget Summon Sign? I've been on that show like 3 times. Yeah, so I've been doing their thumbnails, and that's because I am like an avid listener of the Sacred Symbols podcast. I've been a fan of Colin for a long time, like going back to when I was writing at IGN. I like only got into writing about games because I was a fan of Colin Moriarty's podcast Beyond. So I was listening the other day, and they were talking about the pre-order system for the PS5 Pro, and Colin had a really good idea that I honestly am shocked I didn't think of, because I talk about PlayStation stars so much. They should have tied being able to pre-order the 30th anniversary console to a specific level of PlayStation stars. Like, they could have sold it as a reward, right? Like, you get these first party games from Sony, you play through The Last of Us Part 1 for an hour, you play through some Gran Turismo 7, maybe something else from the PS Plus Essential Picks, and then once you hit those 3 objectives, you earn a credit pass to be able to pre-order the 30th anniversary PS5 Pro. But if they could tie it into actually playing games on your PlayStation console and then reward the people who actually play games instead of complaining about them incessantly on the internet, I think that would be a really cool way to offer up pre-orders and make it a lot more fun than it currently is. And it would, of course, cut down on the massive influx of scalpers that happen every time there's something really cool out there. I mean, my wife wants to pre-order all the Wicked merch from Target because she loves the play in the book Wicked, and she's kind of excited for the movie, but she was asking me, like, when does Target stuff drop? I got to make sure I get it before scalpers get it. So the scalping epidemic is even affecting the wifes. It's crazy. So when Colin was talking about it, his suggestion was that you would have to be level 4 on PS stars to actually take advantage of being able to buy a PS5 Pro for the 30th anniversary. I'm going to argue a little bit and say it should be level 3. And the main reason is you want the PS5 Pro 30th anniversary edition to go to the hardest core PlayStation fans. And I would say that a lot of the hardest core PlayStation fans are like me, who buy physical games. And when you buy physical games, you do not get PS Stars credit. They don't have a system like the Nintendo Switch does, where you get a little code on the back of the box inside of it when you open up the game that allows you to get your Nintendo Gold coins. They don't have that for PlayStation Stars. So I'm still level 3 because I don't have a lot of digital games. I bought the vast majority of my games physical this generation, and even the games that I did buy digitally, I went back and bought a few of them physically just because I want to make sure I always have those discs. And I will be using my PS5 Slim's disc drive in my PS5 Pro because I want to be able to play all of my physical games on my default console. And I have bought a fair few digital games as well. Like, I am very close to level 4 just from buying like season passes and stuff like Diablo 4 and Destiny and Call of Duty and everything like that. Like, all of that seems to count towards your overall level. But if you added up the amount of games I've bought, which is quite a few, even with the double dipping that I've done, I should be level 4, but I'm not. So it would suck for me as someone who is a diehard PlayStation fan who plays the vast majority of my games on PlayStation consoles to miss out on being able to pre-order the 30th anniversary one using PS Stars because I didn't buy games digitally. Like, that's a failing of PS Stars that I should not be punished for. So I like the idea of tying it into PS Stars. I would just say make it level 3 because getting from 2 to 3 actually takes a long time, and then getting from 3 to 4 is like impossible if you buy physical games. Like, even if you're buying a lot of DLC and season passes and everything like that, it won't add up enough because I do that. I play a lot of live service games. I buy the battle passes every season, and I am still not level 4. So there's your evidence for that. Also, I think it's worth bringing up that in Japan, the pre-order for the 30th anniversary console was done much better than it was here in the States. You had to have like 30 hours of game time logged in your PS4 or PS5, and I think like the last year or two to be able to pre-order the PlayStation 5 Pro 30th anniversary edition. I think that's great. I wish they did that here in the United States. I don't know why Sony is playing so heavily into scalpers' hands. The cynical way to look at it is that they knew that the PS5 Pro demand wasn't going to be as high as it obviously was for the original PlayStation 5, just because it's a mid-gen refresh, it's for the hardcore, and also it's $700, so they wanted to maximize the amount that they could ship out from PlayStation Direct and then just throw their hands up and say, well, we sold them for the MSRP, someone will buy them eventually from a scalper, and then they'll start spending money on the PlayStation Store, so we'll get the money back in the back end anyway. But the other way that I think they're looking at it is, I don't know, there's just a lot more people, I guess, playing games here in America than there is in Japan, so you can run a system like that. Or they're looking at the tea leaves and saying, wow, a lot of the people who talk about being fans of stuff like PlayStation and Silent Hill 2 don't actually play a lot of games. So if we did this 30-hour limit to make sure you could buy the PS5 Pro, a lot of people who want it wouldn't be able to buy it because, you know, they don't actually play their consoles. They just bitch about them online. There are so many people out there like that. Like, I saw a news article going around over the weekend that cracked me up, where it was like, the Silent Hill fandom is the only fandom out there who's going to be devastated with all the 9s and 10s that the remake got. Like, they're the only fandom out there who is massive and is like diehard fans of a franchise that they have never played. Like, the easiest way to shut up a Silent Hill fan who's bitching at you on Twitter is to just say, post a screenshot from you completing the game. They will disappear in 2 seconds because none of them have played a single Silent Hill game. So yeah, I think the Japan system worked well. Anything's better than what we had here in the States. I really hope that in the future, they have a system like they had in Japan, or tie it into PlayStation Stars. You know, you made this whole rewards program, actually make it fun and interesting by rewarding people who play PlayStation games with your coolest products. I think that would just make a lot of sense. So good idea, Colin. I think the level 4 level is a little too high. Sorry. I have a lot of physical games. I can't get to level 4 unless I buy a lot of them digitally, and I'm already spending a lot of money on games. It just makes sense. Like, I buy these games for $70 at launch physically. I'm bleeding myself dry. Anyway, that brings us to the third news story here, which is that more remasters are coming to your PlayStation 5. And like, I'm just like kind of getting sick of these. I don't really understand the philosophy here. Like, I get it from a perspective of they're quick to make, they're cheaper to make than fully remaking the game. You sell them for the $10 upgrade and you make a little bit of money back very quickly. But it turns out that people aren't really buying them. Like, the sales figures on the Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection were abysmal. I'm assuming that no one really bought the Until Dawn remake because I haven't seen a single person talk about it. I'm not buying it because it runs crappier than the original, and even though it apparently teases the sequel, I think they waited too long and I don't really care at this point. And also, there's a really good pathway that's been discovered by Capcom and Konami lately where you remake older games, like not 7-year-old, you go all the way back like 20, 25 years with Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, Resident Evil 4, of course, Silent Hill 2, Metal Gear Solid 3, Delta Snake Eater, whatever they're calling it. Like, that makes a lot more sense to me because you can fully remake the game and modernize it and make it new and different. Whereas if you compare that to stuff like the Legacy of Thieves collection or Horizon Zero Dawn's remaster, it's the same exact game. Like, yeah, they recorded some new VO for Alloy, which is awesome. Or in The Last of Us Part 1, they brought it back up to the level of The Last of Us Part 2, which they then again remastered for the PS5. So now they're not equivalent anymore. It's really weird. I don't like that kind of remaster just because it feels like wasted time and resources that could be used elsewhere, like finishing up your first party games that we've been waiting years for at this point. Like, what the hell is going on there? It just really blows because there's so much opportunity that Sony has with PS3 and PS4 even era games like Killzone, SOCOM, Resistance, Infamous. Like, get these new small studios that you've been picking up to take some of these old franchises that aren't being worked on anymore and create a small scope game in that universe, whether it's a remake or a new entry, like a smaller $50 or $60 game, something like, I don't know, like Astrobot scale. And then if they do a good job, give them money and resources to develop a sequel that revives the franchise. You could have so many single player franchises cooking in the background all at once that don't need to be the scope of something like Spider-Man 2 or God of War Ragnarok. And when you get into these situations where all of your biggest developers are stuck at the same point where they're all the same 5 or 6 years into development of their next huge game, you have other stuff to throw into the mix that isn't third-party exclusives that either don't run up to the PlayStation standard or are too niche to really capitalize capitalize on the audience of PS5 gamers. You know, I'm talking stuff like Rise of the Ronin, Stellar Blade, even Silent Hill 2 to some extent. All of those are third-party exclusives for the PlayStation 5, and I don't think they really live up to the expectations that we have as first-party PlayStation gamers. But yeah, guys, that's all I've got for you in today's video. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.